So this evening, I'm going to show you how to assemble the Delta 36-725 contractor saw that's carried at Lowe's. I've been hearing a lot about how difficult this saw is to assemble with the instructions, so I'm going to run through. I'll preface by saying that I use some salty language, like I call things retarded. And I consider myself to be rather retarded in terms of putting things like this together. So it's loving. And I'm also from New England, and we call literally everything retarded here. I've been called a donkey. I've been called retarded. I've been called an R-tard, sack tits. So it's just part of the lexicon here. So no offense meant by it. So opening the box, you can see that it's all fairly well packaged in there. It's nicely arranged, nicely padded. The most important parts, the steel tops and the trunnion and the motor, are buried in the center of this entire packaging, farthest from harm. So we can see we have some boxes of hardware, bags of hardware here and there. So we're going to take a look through those and see if we can't figure out what pieces we're supposed to be using to put this together. All right, so in the stand, you see that it says, use an M8 70mm carriage bolt, and then a 6mm times 70mm bolt and nut, and then an M6 times 12mm self-tapping bolts. Now, there's two things wrong with that. I don't know what any of those things look like. And two, metric? Are you fucking kidding me? Jesus Christ, you might as well just spit in the American flag. But anyways, it's actually not that hard to figure out what these are. They have them compartmentalized bag by bag, they just don't label them. So you can basically figure out which parts are which based on the number that they are and whether they look like they could do the job. So for the stand assembly, there are three sets of fasteners. This is the number 1 in the stand assembly. These are number 2. And these are number 3 in the stand assembly. So we're going to put that together now. Alright guys, apologies. Part 3 is actually this set of 16 Phillips head bolts. As you can see in the directions, they only mention putting on one set of panels on each parallel to this crossbar here. But they never mention when you're supposed to put on the other 2 sets of panels, which are perpendicular. So I figured what they actually meant is install all of the support panels at this point using these 16 bolts. The hex bolts that I showed you earlier here are actually for, I think they're for connecting the table extensions instead. Now I gotta say, I like this fucking stand. I mean, just looking at the thing, solid, thick, tubular steel. It's heavy as hell. Just feels sturdy as shit. Now, some of the holes drilled through these tubular steel pieces have these little black pieces of tape stuck over them, and I'm thinking you're going to want to remove these before you start assembling so that you actually see where the holes are. So, no big deal there. Now, this all seems fairly self-explanatory to me, but when you're putting a carriage bolt in a hole like this, you can see there's a round hole and a square hole on top overlapping. And if you look at the carriage bolt itself, it has a square flange underneath the head there. So, I mean, just in case, someone's retarded and doesn't know how to do this, you want the square holder made up with here so that it can't twist. And then they don't mention in the instructions, but this assembly also has a lock ring. And obviously you want the lock ring to be on the other side of this with the nut behind it, and not blocking the carriage bolt from getting to this square hole. So after the first part of the leg assembly here, they want you to insert this into the table base, and they mean for you to do it inside the box. And so they've packaged this thing kind of nicely so that it's facing in the right direction to be assembled off the rip. So I've removed all the other pieces from inside the box along the sides here, and I'm going to assemble the legs in here, and then I'm going to cut the box apart and use the box to kind of shield it as I flip it over. And you'll notice that there's these the wheels here on the sides to adjust the blade angle and the blade height. We're probably not going to want to roll them in that direction or in the direction of the other knobs, and the dust port, I believe, is on one side here as well, on the back, going through here. So we're not going to want to roll it onto that. So we'll figure out the best way to roll this thing in a second. I know a lot of people are curious about the insides of this machine, so if you look inside here, I mean, it's real pretty. It looks like the inside of like a 2014 Lexus. It's real clean. Everything's nice and boxed up. There's absolutely no burr or any other kind of manufacturing defects. It's clean as hell. I can't believe how clean it is in here, considering it's been sitting at Lowe's, and everything looks real nice right now. Interesting fun fact, on these support plates, 3 of the holes that are drilled in it are large enough for the bolt to pass directly through without catching on anything. One hole on all 4 plates is smaller than the other ones, and the bolt actually has to be threaded. You have to force it through. I guess that's why these are self-threading bolts. But just, something odd. I've never run across something like this before. But anyway, just for a heads up. Okay, so prior to putting the plates on, I found it helpful to break down the sides of the box with a box cutter. Man, I can't even say that word without thinking about that Breaking Bad episode. I mean, holy shit, that was a fucking hardcore episode. But anyways, it really helps having these box sides out of the way for putting the sides on. Okay, so there you have it. So one tip with putting these plates on, get all 4 screws partially set before you tighten any one of them down. Otherwise, when you get to the last screw, it's going to want to go in sideways. So just make sure to do it kind of like you're putting on a spare tire. Like, put them all on a little bit and then tighten them down, one on each side, diagonal-wise, okay? Alright then, for this part, fixed wheels and stationary feet, there are 2 sets of parts. 2 feet and 2 wheels. Putting them on, you use these 2 bolts for the wheels. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so it's time to flip this thing onto its feet. And they suggest to flip it on the side where the dust port is, and to use a 2x4 to make sure that the dust port doesn't hit the floor and get broken. I'm actually going to use a pile of the styrofoam that I already broke off the sides to serve the same purpose. So I'm going to give it a flip. Correction, this thing's a lot heavier than it looks. That styrofoam was not going to cut it. So they suggest 2x4. I'm actually going to use a 4x4. Because I think that dust port sticks out farther than a 2x4 is thick. So I'm basically going to roll it over the 4x4 and then pull it up onto its feet. Okay, so I got it up onto its feet. Now, I'm sure the manual says this is a 2-person job, but it really isn't. You just got to be careful. It is much heavier than it looks. Definitely having 2 people would help because you could make sure that the feet went down right, but I was able to get it up no problems myself, just pivoting it on that 4x4. So I've got it nestled here in its corner. It's got a ton of grease on the surface holding the plastic down, so I'm going to leave that on for now. And it's next to my my other 2 pride and joys here, my big 18-inch jet bandsaw and my air filtration system. And I really wanted to get a jet. Just to at least match the other stuff in here, but I don't have $1,000, $1,200, whatever the jet version of this costs. And I read that the older ones, the kind of sheet metal legs collapse if you roll it around and it hits a divot. So I decided to shy away from that. But anyways, got it up on its feet. So on to attaching the extension wings. I've heard people complaining about these online because they're sheet metal. But they're actually quite heavy. Probably each one weighs like 15, 20 pounds. They're pretty thick and rigid, so I wouldn't say they're flimsy. Problem here in the directions, I'll wait for it to focus, is you see here they say attach using one of these hex bolts with the lock ring, and they say to use 2 per side. But if you look at these, you can see that there's actually 3 holes, connection holes there. And if you switch to the next page and look at the diagram there, you can see that that 3rd hole is now visible there. So we have actually 8 of these. So I know what to do with 6 of them, but I'm not sure what to do with the other 2. So we'll see how things go with the assembly, and I'll probably have to come back and figure this out later. But for now, I think we may have 2 extras. Alright, so mystery solved here on those bolts. 2 of the holes on the table you can see are quite thick diameter. And then this middle hole, the 3rd hole we were wondering about, is actually a much smaller gauge. So the fasteners I was referring to won't even fit in here. So we'll have to figure out what that 3rd hole is for as we go along. Alright, so when you're putting these wings on, they go on pretty nice. This is another part where it might be helpful to have a second person. And there is some play in when you're tightening these things up. So make sure that the surface of the extension is parallel or level with the tabletop, because you can actually put them on in such a way that there'll be a lip between the two. But if you're just careful and tighten them down a little bit at a time and make sure that the top is parallel or completely even, then they'll go on great. Alright, so for hooking on the front and rear rails, we're going to be using 8 of these flathead hex screws with these hex nuts on the other side, and these, what do you want to call them? Lock washers, look like little cogs in the middle there. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so here are the much maligned split rails. And it's probably not as obvious from the video, but the rear rails are kind of a thinner or less bulky. The front rails are about maybe 2 inches. The angle iron is like 2 inches on either side, whereas the rear rail is like 1.5 inches, maybe an inch. So the short piece in both cases goes on the left-hand side of the table, and the long piece goes on the right. Then looking at these rails, you can see that there's 2 sets of holes. There's ones that are kind of divoted in to fit the head of this bolt that's going to go in there. And there's another set that are just normal drilled straight through round holes. So these are the ones we're going to use to attach, the divoted ones are the ones we're going to use to attach it to the table surface. So this is our rail union plate here that is used to hook the front ends of the rail together. And this is a calibration guide that they sent along with. So I've only put in 2 screws per rail so far because I'm going to adjust them with this gauge to make sure that they're perfectly in line before I tighten everything up. Okay, mystery solved. The remaining 4 of these hex head bolts that we used a little bit of earlier are for finishing connecting the rear fence. There's only 4 holes in the 2 pieces of the rear fence for those flathead screws. Alright, this was a fucking bitch putting these rails on. Squaring them up, my one piece of advice, I guess, we put all the screws in first, and then start from one end and square it up as you go and work your way to the other. That's the only way I could find to do it where I could get it all square at once. It took a while, and it's a lot of crouching, but now that it's square and tied up, it's pretty nice. Alright, next is the fence guide, and and I guess the power control box. The fence guide hooks on with these 5 little screws with lock nuts on them. And so the left-hand side of the fence guide goes to 15 inches, the right-hand side goes to, I think, 30 inches. So it's pretty easy to figure out which side is which. Okay, so there's actually 6 button head screws to connect here. There's actually 2 in the middle here where they've indicated 1, and the power control box needs to be hooked on at the same time. So it actually screws onto the underside, through the underside of the rail into the fence guide. So it needs to be screwed on first, and then you work your way down. Okay, so then you use this small screw and this plastic clip to affix the power cord to the side of the cabinet, the back part of the power cord with the plug, so that it doesn't get underfoot and make you pull the power box off when you trip on it. So then the loose part of the power cable gets affixed to the back of the rail here. There's a small hole there for it. Okay, so finally, you use the remainder of your hardware, these flathead screws, hex screws with the nylock nuts here, and attach this spreader bar in between the 2 far ends of the rail. Alright, 2 points of order putting in this spreader here. Don't put the the fence guide in first, because no tool will fit in there to hold that, so you can get an Allen wrench in there to hold that hex nut steady while you're screwing it on. So, you know, point of contention. Also, that innermost nut, you have to basically hold it with a vice grip, kind of parallel to the spreader bar, because again, none of my sockets would fit in there, or wrenches would fit around it once it's in there. So just a minor design thing, but now it's in there. Alright folks, a couple final points. Before you raise the blade, you have to turn the entire assembly to 45 degrees, and then there's a styrofoam block up underneath there to protect the motor. I forgot to take it out before we put it on its legs, so I stuck a stick through that little smiley face there and bashed it out, and it fell out. Everything, all the rest of the assembly is pretty self-explanatory. You put the handles on the wheels there. There's handles that spin for the wheels and one that doesn't for the fence. Blade guard and anti-kickback pawls are, you know, fairly self-explanatory to put on. You just have to raise the riving knife up to the cut-through position. And then the fence, Jesus Christ, the fence is like, I don't know, 30 pounds. It is a solid fence. And after you adjust the little skids here on the ends to get it parallel, while you're sliding it, it won't exactly stay square. But then as soon as you lock it down, it'll just, I mean, it's solid and it just stays right in line where you put it. So really nice fence. So I guess the only thing left to do is to plug this thing in and turn it on. Alright, so here's the test everyone's always asking for, the 20 centime euro piece test. Well, by that I mean the nickel test. So we'll turn the thing on and I'll let you hear how loud it is. Well, alright, I guess that's it. I hope this was helpful. I cursed a lot, that's for sure. So good night, YouTube.